Hey, want to hear a story? So Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect is one of the most legendary RPG franchises ever developed, with a galaxy shaped by the player's choices. And the ending is arguably gaming's most infamous. After everything, all the choices you make, the player is given a choice by an inexplicable star child that essentially tells you that the battle against the Reapers is unwinnable, and that you need to choose some kind of compromise ending. The greater universal implications of these endings are largely unexplored, so I won't really explain them here. But no matter the ending, many players felt empty and disappointed by the final choice Commander Shepard was forced to make by the random star child who appeared before them. In the best of these endings, you're hailed as a hero of the galaxy, but many players didn't feel like a hero, and it led to an ending that is known as one of the most disappointing of all time. A little too familiar to something that just happened. Unfortunately, that ending carries a shocking amount of similarities to the way Critical Role Campaign 3 ended. Not just Critical Role Campaign 3, but this whole era of Exandria ended in a way that divided much of the fan base. Look, I was around when Critical Role Campaign 2 ended. I was close to Critical Role Campaign 1's ending as well, so I caught the hubbub. And dude, the conversation back then was not nearly as crazy as the conversations being had right now. It's funny because there's this ongoing discussion about how the Critical Role community censors criticism so aggressively. You can't criticize the show with these people. But like on the main subreddit, man, this is what it looks like. How in the hell do Bell's Hells come out as the heroes in this? In what world is that a thing? Let's hope Campaign 4 is less about the gods and saving the whole world. Honestly, I've got some mixed feelings about Campaign 3. It's complicated. Something just felt off for me this time around. Well, it's an ending, I guess. I don't know. I wish I could ignore how we got here. Whoever's in charge of censoring all the criticism must be just like on their ass or something, because they're doing a really bad job. Look, I don't think this ending is universally despised or anything. There's a lot of people who love it, and for good reason. Hell, I liked it a lot. There's a reason why there's Masterpiece in the title of this video, because I think overall it's still Critical Role. It's still good. This cast is amazing, but it was still tied into a plot line that didn't connect with a lot of the audience, and I think that's worth interrogating. I think it's worth figuring out, why did this plotline in particular act as the straw for so many of the Critical Role fandom, and what's going to happen next to the Critical Role Campaign 4 because of it? I have no idea, but I can speculate. Without further ado, what the hell happened? Okay, so if you have no problem with me talking about Critical Role, you can skip this part, but I want to say at the top here, I'm not some hater who's jealous of Matt Mercer. I love Critical Role, guys. I'm in this position in my life because of Critical Role. Critical Role inspired me to start DMing. So obviously, I think the show is awesome. However, I do think it is worth interrogating why so many people fell off of Critical Role Campaign 3. Why this ending has received the discussions that it has. I think that that is an interesting subject worth looking into and shouldn't be just ignored because you personally might enjoy the ending. Again, I'm a person who enjoyed the vast majority of this episode. That doesn't mean I'm going to completely ignore the parts I didn't enjoy. Alright, this is just my personal opinion, my personal point of view, but I don't think me being a bit disappointed in the ending of a show I ostensibly love justifies my livelihood and my life being threatened. Just my personal opinion, though. I can't really control what you do. I just think this is an interesting topic to cover. I'm not a hater. I love Critical Role. But when you love something, I don't think that means it's immune to criticism. So, yeah, alright. I feel like for a lot of you that's obvious, but I just wanted to get it out of the way at the top here. So, what the hell is this God plot I keep on talking about? Okay, so Critical Role Campaign 3 was structured very differently from Campaigns 1 and 2. In those campaigns, there were way more isolated arcs. Yes, there was an overarching story with recurring characters, duh, but each individual story had a lot more of a start and an end point. In Critical Role Campaign 3, there's much more of an overarching plot that spans almost the entirety of the campaign. This plot revolves around Ludinus, an archmage, and Predathos, the God-Eater. You see, millennia ago, the gods of Exandria fought a little battle against a creature called Predathos that followed them to Exandria from their realm of origin. Predathos nommed on a couple of their divine siblings before the gods locked it away inside of a big old rock that became the moon! Specifically, the moon of Ruidus. Ruidus is calling up Ruidus Born because Predathos is starting to wiggle free a bit and wants to get out so it can nom on the rest of the gods, and it needs the Ruidus Born to set him free. Ludinus the Archmage is essentially like the Thanos-esque instigator, right? This guy wants revenge against the gods for what happened to an ancient city a long time ago. He's a bitter, angry old dude who wants the gods to be destroyed, and he will do this by releasing Predathos upon them and allowing Predathos to eat their family. Pretty succinct plan, I gotta say. I'm impressed with the guy. Bell's Hells have come into conflict with Ludinus, and therefore they've been tasked with stopping him, alongside heroes from both the Mighty Nine and Vox Machina, an entire world united against the Ruby Vanguard for the fate of the gods of Exandria. This plot is pretty freaking epic. I talked about really liking the scale in the previous episode of Tabletop Tavern Tips, my D&D advice show. So why don't I like it? I mean, I seemingly have a lot of praise for it. Well, the problems come in when we start looking at what the player characters have to say around the gods, because that's where people definitely took a turn. Many members of Bell's Hells started to wonder, like, hey, now, I know we're trying to stop Ludinus from fulfilling his, evil plan of releasing the God-Eater, but, like, if Ludinus did release the God-Eater and all the gods got nommed on, like, would that really be so bad? I mean, what have the gods ever done for us? This was a refrain that really started to catch some flack on the official Critical Role subreddit. You know, the one that's supposedly known for all the criticism censorship. Yeah, I remember how people were first reacting during the party split. It was like a bloodbath. It was crazy. It was clear that this campaign was exploring a more morally gray question. It's not about saving the gods, it's whether or not the gods even deserve to be saved. And unfortunately for Critical Role, in the eyes of a lot of fans, the answer was just a resounding like, yeah, why would you want to release the God-Eater? And over time, especially as the party continued to be decisive for months and months and months, 10, 20, 30 episodes plus, going on and on, it started becoming more and more frustrating for many members of the audience watching the cast fumble around about whether or not all the gods disappearing is actually a good idea. People found it to just not be very compelling. I managed to sort of just like work around this problem. I would skip past the scenes where they were waffling about whether or not the gods are good, back and forth, coming to very little to no conclusion. I just skip those scenes and focus on the stuff that I love, because I really love these characters. But as we got to the climax of the campaign and Predathos got closer and closer, it became obvious that this was no longer something that could just be ignored and moved past. And that's where things started really hitting the fan. Many of the top posts of the Critical Role subreddit, again, the official one, known for all the censorship, many of the top posts were directly critical of the God plot. Again, the one that's known for all the censorship, were directly critical of the God plot in ways that did not mince words. It's funny, because as the campaign progressed, I feel like this plotline was kind of walked back a bit. At first, it was kind of implied the gods would die. That's what many people in the fandom assumed, that the gods would just like meet their execution at the hands of Bell's Hells and Predathos, which I don't think that was ever going to happen, but a lot of fans thought it, so I'll bring it up. It was then definitively walked back when the Archeheart himself, the god of magic, appeared before Bell's Hells and offered them a plan where Predathos would be unleashed and it would essentially chase away the gods off of Exandria. And then, after that, it was walked back yet again, very, very last minute. In like one of the last episodes of the entire series, a plan was proposed that they could try to force the gods to all become mortals at the threat of unleashing Predathos, therefore solving the problem. And then, it was walked back yet again when it was revealed that they wouldn't really be mortals, they would be reincarnating mortals who would come back over and over and over again in the cycle. And then, in a Beacon episode, Matt Mercer Mercer, I don't think he actually was walking it back, but I just want to continue this joke. Matt Mercer kind of walked it back again by saying that Predathos didn't actually have to be released at all. He could have been killed by a beacon. So all this question about whether or not the gods actually deserve to be on Exandria was kind of irrelevant, since Predathos could have been taken care of anyway. I don't know if any of that was intentional, but I do think it's kind of funny that as the reception to this god plot kept on being negative, I feel like it was continuously walked back over and over and over again. Again, that's what is true dimension levels of speculation, but it's just a funny coincidence if it wasn't intentional. So, why? A morally gray plot line about whether or not the gods are worth saving, that's been done before. I'm a big Destiny and God of War fan. In both those games, you kill gods, like, constantly, all the time. It's like the main conflict, and I find that to be awesome and epic and cool. So why, in this example, did it not work for many members of the audience, partially including myself? I think there are two big points of contention with many fans, including myself. One, the characters just did not have enough of a motivation or stakes in this whole thing in order for it all to work. And two, I don't think the setting really fit a plot line where the gods are going to get disappeared. So, okay, let's start with the characters. There's a conversation in Critical Role Campaign 3 that sticks with me as one of the points where I was just like, what is going on here? When talking about the gods, Ashton said, "The gods can beg me, and I will listen, which is more than they ever did for me." That's like paraphrasing, I'm cutting out a lot of F-bombs, but yeah, that was the big refrain that a lot of the Bell's House party rallied around. The gods never did anything for me, which is kind of weak motivation when you're talking about the removal of gods that have been around for generations upon generations, worshipped by entire cities, temples built in their honor. You're going to let that all go. Thousands of years of culture because they never did anything for you personally? When you look at a character like Kratos in God of War, Kratos hates the gods because Ares, the god of war, is directly responsible for Kratos killing his own wife and daughter. Zeus, his father, who hates him, destroyed Sparta, the realm that he presided over, his people, all killed. That's pretty compelling motivation for Kratos wanting to wipe the Pantheon off the planet. It's a lot more compelling than, "I have faith in chaos." Like, guys, come on. These characters are amazing. Let me make that clear. For the most part, I love the characters of Critical Role Campaign 3. Look, I got a freaking Laudna shirt right here. Best girl. I love Laudna. I love Imogen. FCG. Orym especially. Like, God, I didn't like Orym at first, but he grew on me. And now, I'm in Orym's corner 100%. He's one of my favorite Critical Role characters ever. Alright, that is why I love Critical Role. The characters. But these characters don't seem to be built to fit in this plotline. They weren't built to hate the gods. They don't have any connection to them at all. And they weren't built to like the gods either, so why would they care? God, it's the basic DM advice that Matt Mercer himself gives. Build your campaign around your characters, or have the characters built around the campaign. You want characters that fit the story, and these ones just didn't. Also, on top of that, these characters are supposed to be selfless heroes. Like, people are talking about this campaign as this morally gray anti-hero story. And yeah, there are some moments where I feel that, but guys, they're announced as heroes publicly, given titles and everything. The whole 9 yards. Downright knighted in front of the forces of Exandria, united against this threat. They stand alongside heroes like the Mighty Nine and Vox Machina. Bell's Hells are portrayed as heroes. They are not the villains of this story. People who say that, I feel like either really hate Bell's Hells or alternatively want to defend them, saying that the point of this story is that they're morally gray, but I didn't really see that. They're morally confused. Going back to God of War yet again, Kratos is clearly a selfish, not great guy. There's a whole therapy expansion to God of War Ragnarok that goes over how much of a selfish, not great guy he was at the time. Kratos is complicated by his personal desire for vengeance, but Bell's Hells doesn't have any of that personal desire. They're not anti-heroes because they have no reason to be. They have no stakes in this. They're just in it. Like, that's how I describe it. They just got swept into this, and that kind of bummed me out. People were especially getting frustrated with Bell's Hells since their motivation for releasing Predathos, like actively choosing to release Predathos, was even less fleshed out in my opinion. After so many hours of indecision, hundreds upon hundreds, they get to the moon and they decide to open the door, citing that, oh, well, someone's going to open the door eventually, so we have to do it. Someone on Reddit actually put it best in my opinion with the comment that someone might shoot me with a gun in 10 years, so I might as well just take the gun myself and do it right now. Like, that's how it felt. It didn't help that it felt like the world just kind of bent around to react positively to their actions. But we'll get to that when we get to like the consequences portion of this whole video. We'll get to it later. Look, the point is that while, again, I adore Bell's Hells, I like this party about as much as I like the other Critical Role parties. Maybe slightly less, just because of some characters that didn't land with me. But overall, I really love this group. However, I just think in this specific story, they weren't used to their full potential. Alright, speaking of the story, let's get on to the other problem. The setting. Okay, so the setting of Exandria has gods, obviously, for the God Eater to eat. And in order to do a plot line where you're waffling about whether or not the gods are worth saving, you need to have gods that are morally questionable. And historically, Exandria never really felt like that. If you only watch Critical Role Campaign 3, I could see the argument. Critical Role Campaign 3 presents situations where the gods and their followers are kind of a bunch of dicks. Paylor especially gets a bad rap here. And if of all the gods, I feel like Paylor was the one that was primed to be like the dick-headed, lawful good kind of god. That was Critical Role Campaign 3, a version of the gods that were very cold, very distant, with followers that were almost imperialistic. But then you watch Critical Role Campaign 1 and 2, where it's very, very different. I was actually watching Campaign 2 concurrently with Campaign 3, and it was really, really freaky to go from Campaign 2, where I'm watching Yasha overcome this epic trial by the Storm Lord, in an amazing session where she fights the rest of the party playing Storm Elementals, and then ascends to the Eye of the Tempest and gains the Storm Lord's favor. Epic. Then I move on to Critical Role Campaign 3, and they're like waffling about whether or not the gods are actually worth it, or if they do anything for anyone, and it's jarring. I know it's not meant to be a retcon, where we're showing a new side to the gods of Exandria, but when every single depiction of the gods in Campaign 3, almost universally, not entirely, but almost universally seems to be negative or cold or distant, it does feel like a retcon. It's even more funny because when watching Legend of Vox Machina, you actually do see a literal retcon. Sarenrae, the Everlight, Pike's god in Campaign 1 and in Legend of Vox Machina, was changed in that show to more match the cold, distant, more uncaring version that is present in Critical Role Campaign 3. This new interpretation where the gods are much more willing to abandon their mortal followers. Sarenrae does not abandon Pike in Critical Role Campaign 1. That straight up doesn't happen. The events were changed to match this new interpretation. It's a retcon. Now, in Legend of Vox Machina, I don't care. I think it makes for a really interesting story, and I have a theory that Pike in that continuity might be Ruidusborn, which would be really, really cool. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Look, the point is that, yes, in this setting, the gods have historically been portrayed positively, and now we're expected to switch to a negative viewpoint of them, which for audience members who have been in the community for a while, I don't think that's going to work. It doesn't help that a lot of these moments where the gods prove themselves to be cold and distant, feels like a lot of them happened after the conclusion that maybe they're not worth saving came about. And again, I want to reiterate that Critical Role did kind of walk this back. Again, maybe not intentionally, but the party did come to an empathy with the gods, something that was really shown during the final conversation at the ending. But the road to get there was just filled with frustrating and inconsistent moments. In any case, let's get to the end of that road. What actually happened at the very end of Critical Role Campaign 3? Okay, what's the next thing we gotta... Ah! Crispy! Listen to me if you want to live! Who are you? Crispy number 7, I'm you from a dystopian future where your world building has grown out of control. You need to download World Anvil to stop it. Bro, World Anvil, you're good. They're the sponsor of today's episode. Oh, really? It's perfect for organizing your world building, and you don't need to do it all on your own. There are tons of detailed templates for NPCs, locations, and plots. My personal favorite feature is the interactive nestable maps. These things are a dream come true for me as a guy with a big old map and a need to fill it with lore. If you're an aspiring game master, you literally can't go wrong with World Anvil. And hell, if you're a player, it's also perfect. You need to manage your characters, have everything in one tab with your spells, equipment, resources. Boom! World Anvil has you covered in spades. God, even if you don't play TTRPGs, it can be used for writing a novel, preparing a LARP. If you don't have World Anvil, dang it, you're just missing out. So now that I have World Anvil, are you just gonna, fade away now? Oh yes. The dark future has been prevented. I feel myself. I thought I'd get it over with quicker. Sign up for World Anvil for free today, and you can use my code so that if you want all the features, you can get a neat little discount. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring today's episode. And without further ado, back to the tea. In the end, Bell's Hells encounter an inexplicable star child, Predathos, the God Eater, right out of Mass Effect 3, and take him on in a battle that is truly epic. Seriously, Matt Mercer outdid himself with these final fights, some of his best work. But after all is said and done, and Imogen summons forth a meteor swarm with one of the best dice rolls I've ever seen in a D&D game, eventually, they managed to contain Predathos within Imogen Timmelt, Aruidus born. They descend back down to Exandria, carrying Predathos. Obviously, a lot of Vasselheim is very concerned. What the heck? Why did you bring the God Eater here? We're trying to stop that thing. But Imogen and the party insist that they don't have time to explain what they don't have time to explain, which is just as frustrating here as it was in Destiny 1. And demand an audience with the gods. Luckily, the Raven Queen shows up to bail their asses out and get them that audience with the gods. And they initiate a skill challenge where they need to convince all 20 of the gods, good and bad, that they need to give up on immortality, give up on their power, become mortals in a reincarnation cycle so that they don't get eaten by Predathos. Alright, this'll be interesting. And a lot of the conversation here was really interesting. I love seeing Matt Mercer roleplay as 20 different characters, and he killed it. Damn, all these characters were distinct and recognizable. When Vecna popped up, I instantly knew, oh, that one-eyed, black-eyed bastard, I know it's you. And I love that. So they had this conversation with the gods, each party getting their chance to try to convince the gods to give up on immortality. And eventually, at the very end, Imogen Timmelt is given the final dice roll. Matt Mercer tells Laura Bailey that he set the DC to 30, and Imogen rolls a natural 20. And the gods all unanimously agree to become mortal. Which...
The woman was too stunned to speak.
You know that good old D&D meme? The bard rolls a nat 20 against the king and automatically becomes the king of the entire kingdom without any other sort of involvement? I mean, that's kind of what happened. Not really. This was obviously a whole campaign leading up to this. But it was funny to me that all of the gods unanimously decided to give up on immortality. Even the chaotic evil ones? Tiamat, evil 5-headed dragon lady, King Ghidorah on steroids, was yep, I'll be 5 kobolds in a trench coat. Why not? Didn't even try to take a pot shot at Imogen? No, really? The Crawling King, the giant Shai Halud worm that ate its way through the entirety of Exandria's Underdark. That guy was yep, nope, immortality, overrated. Don't need it. I'm good. Really? I understand that there's only so much runtime, but this was an 8.5-hour episode. You can see the shock on my face when I realized that we so quickly wrapped up the entire conversation to convince the gods to be mortal. Hell, there were even good gods where I was thinking, seriously, these guys went without a fuss? Paylor just gave up on all of it? Cord was willing to become mortal. I understand they're holding the gods at gunpoint with Predathos, but like, the gods were just established to have mortal flaws. That's a big part of the fandom's reasoning as to why they need to go. Like, oh, the gods are relatable like mortals, so therefore they shouldn't have this kind of power. They should be mortal, which, okay, I get that. But like, you're telling me that these people with mortal flaws never had the mortal flaw of recklessness? The mortal flaw of like, hey, let's take a pot shot at this human sorceress trying to tell us what to do? Tiamat never tried that, really? Okay, sure. Let's say that the accumulated successes of Bell's Hells all convinced the gods with high persuasion checks and nat 20s to give up on immortality and disband the pantheon, all becoming mortals reincarnating into the cycle. I actually think that this is a really interesting concept. I really like this end point of all the gods being Eidolon-like beings. You know, from Stray Gods, I don't know if anyone played Stray Gods, but it stars Laura Bailey, and this is essentially what happens to the Greek pantheon in that game, endlessly reincarnating deities. I love that. It allows for so many interesting world-building concepts. But again, the road to get there was just so frustrating. Like, seriously, we enter this new age of Exandria because of a handful of skill checks and a couple of sweet speeches? What is this, the Flash television show? That's all it took? Beyond that, a lot of the fandom were disappointed there were no overarching consequences for the world. I never thought Matt Mercer was going to have his world annihilated, but a lot of people were theorizing about, oh, what's going to happen to divine magic? The gods are gone now. What about nature and the world itself? Like, the gods are essential to the running of the world, right? Well, it turns out, not really. The gods have zero effect on divine magic. Their disappearance has no effect on clerics, paladins whatsoever. They're all completely fine, which, okay, sure. As for the running of nature itself, the gods had no hand in that, apparently. The only thing they really had their fingers in was the afterlife, and that's pretty much fine too, since all the souls are going to be released out, and are going to begin reincarnating endlessly, like the natural world was always supposed to. People had their own opinions about whether or not reincarnation was actually dystopian, and I don't really want to get into that, because at this point, I don't really care. Look, Matt Mercer wrote his world to be like this. He wanted the gods' disappearance to not have a major effect on the world, and while I wouldn't do that personally, it's his world, he can do what he wants with it. That's not the kind of critique I'm here to lob. However, even though I understand there being no magical consequences, that's how the world was written, I do feel like there should be some kind of consequences for killing a god. I've been using God of War as my example a lot in this video, so let's keep it up with the Norse saga. In the Norse saga, the gods are pretty scaled down. Freya, Odin, Thor, these gods are still powerful, but they are not the same kind of powerful as like Odin, Poseidon, Hades. Their deaths also have much less overarching consequences for the world. When Zeus dies, a straight up apocalypse is unleashed. When Thor dies, less so of an impact. However, the death of these gods still has a major effect on the world's culture and politics. I mean, Odin was the king of Asgard. When he died, his army of Einherjar were unleashed upon the world, seeking vengeance for their master, and Kratos and Freya have to clean that up. When Freya disappears from Vanaheim in the story for hundreds of years, Vanaheim falls into ruin. Her brother is forced to pick up the pieces and assemble a ragtag group of rebels to fight against the encroaching imperial forces that are destroying her home. These gods have an effect. There are consequences to killing a god. Why? In Critical Role Campaign 3, though, we never really got that. Look, you might be thinking that I want Bell's Hells to be, like, slaughtered by the god's followers, and no, that's not what I want. But I do want there to be some acknowledgement that these are gods that have been revered for generations. In fact, that's one of the arguments made by Laudna during the conversation to convince them to give up their mortality. That they were revered, that they will be remembered. There are cities built in your name. But their disappearance and all that stuff seemingly fades away. You're telling me that an insignificant amount of people cared about the gods vanishing? All the crazed cults that worship Tiamat didn't make a fuss? Seemingly the only kind of consequences we see are against Breas, when Asmodeus swears a vengeance against his paltry follower for this seeming betrayal, and I love that. I was expecting more of the energy going forward, but we didn't really get it. And that was kind of disappointing to me. The disappearance of the gods is fascinating. While I was frustrated with the road to get here, I like the idea of these reincarnating idols. However, the lack of major consequences to the world made the gods feel completely irrelevant, and made it feel like this whole plot line just didn't matter. There's a whole post on the subreddit going over this, criticizing this plot line by just saying that we're in the same position except slightly worse. Because, mind you, the evil gods of Exandria were locked behind a divine gate after the calamity. Now, they are mortal, but they are unleashed upon the world. Like, yeah, Satan is no longer chilling out in hell because he's on Earth, roaming around as Genghis Khan. Awesome! Look, I think the moment I realized this really wasn't connecting with me personally was when they set the DC for the gods at 30.
So the DC on this is a 30.
30!
She's gonna roll that 20.
Which, for every point below 30...
A few moments later.
Are they both
They're
cocked?
both cocked?
Oh my god.
Look, I am definitely not trying to imply that roll was fudge. I don't think it was. I think that was a legit roll. But I realized at the moment that I didn't care whether or not she succeeded that roll. Look, there was definitely a disconnect there, but does that mean I hate the Critical Role Campaign 3 ending or Campaign 3 in general? Hell no, dude. This is still Critical Role, and I still really liked it. Look, just because I have criticism of something doesn't mean that I think it's awful or bad even. Critical Role Campaign 3 is still good. Like, frankly, if this is a home game that I'm playing at, I would be blessed to be at a table like this. Matt Mercer is still a phenomenal DM, and this is still a phenomenal cast. For better or for worse, I've worked in media basically my entire life. And so, I have some view into this field, and I've never seen a cast with this much synergy and chemistry. It's honestly freaking incredible. Straight up, downright impressive. Really, this whole thing solidified that I love Critical Role. Like, yeah, the plot didn't connect with me as much, but I still watched it and I still enjoyed it. Because fundamentally, even when the story is so-so, in my opinion, the cast are still phenomenal. It still is an inspiration to me that pushes me to be a better dungeon master. I do hope in the next campaign the characters are more connected to the story. I do hope that the arc structure returns. I miss the more varied storylines the Mighty Nine or Vox Machina would go on. I do miss those things. I hope that Robbie sticks around. I hope that some aspects of these big stakes also stick around. I do like how the universe felt really connected in Critical Role Campaign 3, and I really love the combat of this campaign. The things that didn't work were largely overshadowed by the things that did. I just don't want to ignore the things that didn't work just because there were things about this campaign that I liked. I don't think that helps anyone, and frankly, that's kind of boring. I mean, come on, this is a T-series. We like some spice around here. But anyway, that's it. I've been recording for a long time. I had a lot of thoughts on this one. And I'm curious what you guys think. Frankly, if you liked Critical Role Campaign 3, I'm hella jealous of you. I wish I stayed up until 4 a.m. watching something that I overwhelmingly enjoyed. But anyway, that's just bitter old me keeping on yapping. Let's wrap this up. If you guys enjoyed, then you might enjoy our Crispy's Academy channel. We just talked about some D&D romance advice. It's linked up in the cards. But before you go, please leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own recommendations or thoughts, you can go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, the new era, to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.